Imagine this. An 18-year-old gangster was jailed for 6 years for taking the life of a corporal. Dad of four, Shaun Roberts has carved himself a career in the British Army, rising to the ranks of corporal, where he was able to provide for his wife and also his 4 children, the oldest being 15 years old. Shaun Roberts, who was 35 years old, was also known as Robbo to friends and family, and he was described as a superb and dedicated soldier that would do anything for anyone. The dad had also served in the Royal Anglian regiment as a sniper and had been active in tours where he had run to the line of fire and actually saved his fellow soldiers. That's a hero. Sadly, Corporal Shaun Roberts was training in the North East and he had travelled to Blyth in Northumberland to let his hair down and relax and enjoy a well-deserved night out over drinks with fellow soldiers and colleagues, and this was on October 6th. Now, Shaun was with a group of army colleagues outside the club when he was spotted by 18-year-old Mason Ibbotson. Mason and Shaun were strangers to each other. They had only crossed each other's path that night, so it was no other reason than ego and bravado that Mason had singled Shaun out. Now, 18-year-old Mason, whom despite having the characteristics of a weasel looking, had trained as a boxer, and he was strong despite his frame and the way that he looked. So he was good with jabs and hooks and also feints. And he had been caught on CCTV leaving the Deja Vu Club at around 3:14 a.m. with pals. Now, Mason's group had been drinking and they were intoxicated, and they had been doing the usual stuff that men do when they're in a group and they're trying to show off. They had been bouncing off each other, laughing very loudly, and also showing off and gesturing to other club goers in front of other people. Now, Mason then adapted the boxer's stance and then bounced from one foot to the other, once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. For no reason, Mason had then caught Shaun's eye, and before Shaun had a chance to react, Mason had been goading him. After a brief confrontation, Robbo had walked up to Mason after he had been requested to do so. Robbo's hands was by his side. Now, before Robbo had a chance to defend himself or even retreat, Mason had gone into full attack mode. Mason threw a strike and it had caught Robbo squarely. This was not a brawl, this was not a one-on-one, this was an 18-year-old man who wanted to prove his dominance in front of his friends after drinking too much against a soldier whom was out with friends and caught completely by surprise because he was not considered a local. Mason had landed a strike on Robbo's face and sadly Robbo's legs gave way. His body went into sleep mode and Robbo crashed to the ground. Right there and then, he was completely unresponsive. Now, even if you are so silly to land a strike on a completely innocent victim, a soldier no less, and then the victim falls to the ground and they are not getting up, common sense would ring alarm bells and it would indicate that something is seriously wrong with the victim. Now, even if you drank, the eerie still of a person motionless right in front of you on that ground would stir something within you. You would be sorry or scared, and even the drunkenness would be evaporated. As 35-year-old Robbo lay dying on the ground, Mason Ibbotson had then pivoted on the tips of his toes and targeted Robbo's friend, another soldier. Mason landed consecutive strikes on Robbo's friend, 5 in total. Now, when Mason was satisfied that he had taught the soldiers a lesson, the guys that were not local, the brute was heard to have laughed and giggled like a school kid, saying, "I think I've got red on my hands. I think I've just K'd someone." Another witness commented that they heard Mason say, "Here, it looks like I'm going to get locked up." Now, a member of Robbo's group was said to have described in detail the events leading up to the very public M. Now, a female had started it off by commenting saying, "Look over there, they're not from round here." At that comment, something wicked within Mason had stirred him into action. Mason and his group had gestured and clearly made an attempt to belittle and irritate Shaun and his pals. When the two groups of men collided, Shaun had shoved Mason's friend, and in response, Mason had launched and swung a combination of strikes. Again, a few. Now, the two groups were eventually pulled apart by members of the public, and that should have been the end of it. However, once the two groups were separated, Mason and his pals then beckoned for Shaun to come forward. Shaun complied, and he took a few steps towards Mason and his friends. Now, Shaun had walked up there himself, not with his groups, but he was the one that took the few steps forward. His hands was by his side, so again, he wasn't offering any resistance or trying to square up to them. Now, after raining down a single blow on Shaun Roberts and then the victim's friend, Mason shouted, come on then, who's next, come on then. He repeated the sentence, shouting it over and over again with so much inflection that saliva had gone everywhere. Now the soldier explained Shaun and the group had been drinking, but they were not overly intoxicated, and everyone was in good spirits. There had been a brief conversation and disagreement that took place between Robbo's group and Mason's group, and it all stemmed from Mason and his friends saying to Robbo, you're not from here, what are you doing here? And of course, in response, when the two groups collided, Shaun had shoved Mason's friend. That was it, that's the only role that Robbo had played, so the witness could not understand why Mason had went into full-on Hulk mode and then k'd a man with a single blow and then celebrated, because before escaping the scene, Mason had raised his arms in the air, proud, triumphant, and then hugged a woman in his group, celebrating his achievement. And he also commented on what he thought he had done, saying, again, I think I've just k'd someone. Corporal Roberts was not just a dad, he was also married, he had a wife, and 999 was called and emergency services were blue lighted to the scene. Still unresponsive, emergency services checked Shaun's vitals before loading the dad into the back of an ambulance and then taking Robbo straight to the hospital, where machines were kept to keep the dad alive. Every day, Robbo's wife and family had to watch as their husband and their loved one was not getting any better, and on November 1st, the decision was made to turn off the life support machine, meaning that Robbo had been declared dead. Now imagine the children knowing that the dad was a hero, a soldier, and it was well documented that he had saved his fellow soldier's life, and then telling the children that dad is not coming home. When they ask why, what do you say? Do you offer an excuse to save them pain, or do you be brutally honest with the children and say, well, 18-year-old gangster called Mason was looking for a scrap and then targeted your dad because he was not local to the area and he was a soldier? Either way, Shaun Roberts' friends and family were left completely devastated because of a coward's actions. Now, Robbo's oldest son was 15 years old, and in court, he described exactly what his dad meant to him. Now, of course, Mason Ibbotson was arrested, and in court, Mason Ibbotson was charged with manslaughter, a crime he gladly pled guilty to. Now, Mason was no stranger to the court system, as he had previous charges for putting his hands on emergency workers and also driving offences. In the end, the judge told Mason that he would be jailed for 6 years and he would have to go to a YO institute. So he took a soldier's life and the punishment was 6 years in jail. Does the crime match the sentence? Let me know. Stay safe.